Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled Adventures Checking Out as a New Airline Captain. Now, to give you a little bit of history, I started out in 1979, August of 1979, as a 737 second officer. Yeah, pretty exciting. Third guy on the guppy. Yeah, that didn't last too long, fortunately. Well, I was actually furloughed out of training and then got brought back because they had a class senior to me that had graduated because I have to go through 727 engineer school and then 737 quote unquote engineer school. So a class actually graduated before I did. And anyway, but then I got furloughed for 4.5 years. Now I came back in 1985 as a second officer on the 727, and we were going into the strike. Now Lloyd Berry told me that hey, if I crossed the picket line on May 18th, I could get to be a 747 captain. That was neat, jumping 6,400 seniority numbers. Well, I didn't do that. I didn't think it was a good idea, and turns out it wasn't for the people who did do it. But anyway, Lloyd Berry lied. Okay, so I'm a 727 second officer on June of 85. Then I upgraded to a 737 co-pilot on December 21st of 1985. Things were kind of moving fairly fast here. Then a 727 first officer on July 16th of 1987. I was a DC-10 first officer, or co-pilot, on January 31st of 1990, and then I upgraded to 737-200 captain on August 9th of 1991. Actually, I took my check ride out at Denver, got my captain's rating from the feds in the simulator, and I was there all by myself, nothing to do, so I went out and watched The Terminator, not 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever. It was Terminator #1. So that's what I did. That's how I celebrated getting to be a brand new captain, at least in the simulator, in the 737. Okay, so now it's time for training. So, I go from Chicago to San Francisco. That's my first leg. And as part of your checkout as captain, they want you to get, they need you to get, initial captain, a ride as a ride with the feds. Okay, so the feds are going to watch you. An FAA check airman is going to watch you fly. So this was my second leg. It's hard to schedule these guys, so they put him on my second leg, which is not the good place to put him. Okay, that's way too early. And he comes on, and he's grumbling. And he goes, "This is your second leg?" And I go, "Yeah." And they go, I wasn't the one who scheduled it. And he goes, "This is too early. We're probably going to have to do this again." And he's grumbling and stuff like that. And he goes, "Well, we'll do this anyway, but I'm sure we're going to have to repeat it." So okay, fine. So I go through all my captain procedures and stuff, and I taxi on out. And in the Air Force, I had a flight commander who said, you always want to give them something to debrief. You never want to fly a perfect check ride. And I can say to this day, I have never flown a perfect check ride. So I've always given them something to debrief. But he was kind of clever at it because they would ask you in the Air Force, they say, when is your check ride for such and such due? And he goes, on my birthday. Well, the actual accident was at the end of the month that your birthday's on. But they'd ask him again, when's your check ride due? And he goes, on my birthday. So when they got done, they'd go through the debrief and they said, well, that's incorrect. He says, it's at the end of the month. He goes, yeah, that's right. My birthday's at the end of the month. All right. And they said, my check ride, not in general. So he had a couple of things that appeared wrong that weren't, but I digress. Okay. So we're taking off. And we're going from San Francisco down to San Diego. It's a nice short little trip. And okay, don't criticize me on the pictures. I'm doing the best I can on the internet. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have the internet. I mean, this was crude stuff. So I'm doing the best I can on pictures. I didn't have my little phone to, get up there and take a bunch of pictures. So we're heading on down. I'm going down to San Diego. The weather's, get the weather report, and it's nice. But, I'm out over the ocean. We turn in on downwind. And as we're on downwind, we're going by, and I look down and I see the field, and that's nice, but the trouble is the sun is starting to set. And you got just a little haze in the San Diego area, and the sun's setting. And I go by, I see the field, that's fine. Now, we always had as a backup on the landing on runway 27 there, the only thing we had was a localizer, of course, because it's a steep approach. It's a fun airplane to fly in as a pilot, but it's a steep approach and it's challenging, and it's fun because it's challenging. But okay, there's no ILS. It's a localizer coming in on 2.7. So I have it tuned up in that, but don't brief the approach because we're not going to fly an approach. Well, I start my turn to base, and I go, oh my gosh, I can't see a thing. I'm just looking into a cloud of haze. And I say to my co-pilot, who's sitting in the right seat, who's my line check airman, I said, okay, we're going to have to shoot the localizer approach. I tell approach, I said, I can't see the runway, need the approach. He goes, Roger, you're cleared for the approach. So it was a real quick brief of the approach. Okay, the altitudes and all the stuff we have to brief on the approach. It's the date and it's this number and all this stuff. And we go through that in about 20 seconds, and I'm coming in on final. And I pick up the localizer. I step down the various altitudes. And the nice thing about, coming down here is you're coming over the terrain that slopes here. And it's really kind of fun coming in, especially for the passengers, because you're really close to the buildings. And I'm sure anybody who's flown in there know how kind of much fun and interesting this is. But before I got to the MDA minimums on the approach, I picked up the runway. The haze had subsided enough that I was close enough that I had good visibility. And I came in and land. Okay. And we go on and we head on over towards the gate. Now, this is San Diego here, and as you know, even when you're coming in, what's the normal profile, it looks really steep. So it's a challenging approach. And I turn off, I park it there. The FAA guy was impressed how I handled that, and he goes, you're good. We don't need another right. So I felt good about that. And then as he walks out, I turn to my co-pilot there, my line check airman, I said, before we turn, you had a better view of the runway I did. I said, you could tell I couldn't see anything. Why didn't you say something? And he says, well, I was playing not very good co-pilot, and if you're going to sit in that left seat, you'd better be able to handle something like that, and I just wanted to see what you'd do. All right, thanks a lot. All right, well, we're moving on. Now, this was a fun checkout. I had been a co-pilot stuff, and I'd seen a few little things, but I seem to have more adventures on this first captain checkout than I can remember on most of my flights. So we're down at Los Angeles, and we're pushing back, and all of a sudden I hear a clunk. Well, as you can look down there, that yellow thing, that's a tow bar. It connects to the nose wheel. Now, the design load of a nose wheel on transport aircraft is the towing loads. That's the heaviest load you have because you push the whole aircraft through that little nose gear. So it's made very strong, but there's a little bracket there, and you attach it, and in case something goes wrong, it will actually shear. But every once in a while, they don't get this bracket on really, really tight. And as he was pushing back, that clunk I heard was the tow bar coming disconnected. Well, the guy in the cab there has a headset, and there's a cord that goes from the cab to where it's plugged in to the airplane. And as this thing broke, and I'm still rolling back because there's a certain amount of momentum, and I don't really know what's happened at this point, and I'm rolling backwards, and the cord is getting stretched, and it's about to disconnect. And of course, he knows I don't know what's going on here, and he starts yelling, brakes, brakes, brakes. And of course, it's a real panic type of yelling, so I stomp on the brakes. Well, as you can imagine, the way these aircraft are balanced, the nose gear came about 18 inches off the ground and slammed back down. Okay. Well, of course, he comes back, he looks up and stuff like that. But as the nose gear slammed back down, my line check airman, my co-pilot in the right seat, he picks up the handset on the PA. He hands it to me and he says, okay, Captain, you need to make an announcement. So I had to kind of explain what happened there. Anyway, we got hooked up. We got pushed back. The rest of the thing continued. I got signed off on the 737. So that was fun. The only other kind of weird thing that happened on it was on the Dash 300s, we had a fan there in the forward galley. And when the flight attendants would open up the fan would suddenly stop. And I would look at my crewmate and like it sounded like we had an engine failure. Well, it took us a while to realize it was just the galley fan there in the oven, but that was a little kind of interesting side note. Okay, well, now I'm going to upgrade to the 727. That was my next airplane. All right, so I'm upgrading to 727 Captain. That occurred on January 12th, 1993. And it's funny. I looked in my logbook. I don't really have any notes. Can't really remember anything exciting that happened on this checkout, so it must have gone all right. All right, let's move on. So on June 3rd of 1997, I'm upgrading to Airbus Captain. Now, the thing of it was, for about the last 6 years, I was chairman of the new ALPA National Airline Pilots Association National Committee, the New Aircraft Evaluation Certification Committee. So I had been flying on test flights Airbus aircraft, quite a few of them. Actually, I flew the 319, 20, 21, 330, 340, and a couple versions of the 340. I flew the 318, but I think that was before I checked out as captain also. So I had written a lot of articles for the magazine. Everybody knew me as somebody who had flown the Airbus in flight tests. So now I'm going to get checked out as captain. Well, that's kind of interesting because you got a little bit of a reputation there you have to deal with, and people kind of expect things of you, like maybe you should know how to fly this aircraft pretty well. Okay, well, that can be interesting. And the other thing was, going through it, my co-pilot was, or had been, Thunderbird lead, U.S. Air Force Thunderbird lead for 2 seasons. This is my co-pilot. Okay. I was up against some interesting competition there because I definitely had a very sharp co-pilot to deal with. All right, so I'm going to get checked out in the Airbus. All right, so I got a friend who also does safety work, a guy named Jeff, and he's a line check airman. So, okay, he's going to do my checkout. Well, it sounds like fun. Now, having a friend do your checkout can be good or bad, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit when I talk about me being an LCA. And I've given check rides to people I've known well out in the Air Force and stuff like that. And the thing is, I think it's almost more stressful because you do not want to embarrass yourself in front of a friend. I think it's easier to embarrass yourself in front of somebody who doesn't know you than it is somebody who does, because you're going to have to live with that. So we're doing the checkout. Jeff's my co-pilot LCA, and we're flying around. It's going pretty well. I knew the aircraft well enough and stuff like that. I mean, in training, they would ask me systems questions like, how do you get into alternate law? And it's usually through a series of failures. And I would just say, well, I just asked Fernando, the flight test engineer, to put us in alternate law, and he would. And they go, no, that's not the right answer. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so I'm flying the airplane, and we're going into Denver. Okay, we're flying into Denver, DEA. This is not it. I know this is not the picture, but it was a good sight picture I had because we're coming on in here, and I'm flying into Denver. Now, we're doing a flaps 3, and Denver's high altitude airport, so the air is a little thinner and stuff like that. And, the thing on the 27, you can have thousands of hours on it, as I did, and every once in a while it's going to bite you. Well, the Airbus is much more forgiving and much more good airplane to fly, but I absolutely pranged this runway. I think it was one of the east-facing runways. I forget which one, but I pranged it, and it was like, oh my gosh. Jeff is concerned. He says, "Did we have a hard landing?" And I go, "Well, let's go check something." So, the term, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with, horse defecation sort of thing, or cow defecation, I guess it actually is. So I said, well, let's go take a look at the struts, because if we'll see a little ring of dust on the strut, and we can tell if it's not fully compressed that we didn't have a hard landing, because you got to, if you have a hard landing, you fully compress the strut. So we go out there and we're looking at that strut, and I see a little ring there, and a little ring of dirt, and you can tell it's past the normal spot. And I say, see, that wasn't a hard landing. Well, guess what? See, since Jeff was on the safety committee, he had access to what's known as FOQA data, which was Flight Operations Quality Assurance. What it did is they de-identified the data, but he could go in there and actually find the data for the specific flight. Normally they de-identify it, put it all together, and they look for trends. You know, are people overspeeding things? Are they, doing weird things? Are they not getting stabilized? Stuff like that. So it's a way to analyze the flying and see overall trends. Well, he goes in and checks it out, and he comes back to me and he says, our landing was at 1.7 Gs. Fortunately, that did not apparently qualify as a hard landing, so I was okay not writing it up, but he says that was a 1.7 G landing. Well, that's not how you impress your friends. Okay, well, I went and I flew the Airbus for a while, and I became a line check airman on it. I was also a line check airman on the 727. I flew both of those till I got to the point where I got senior enough that I could easily move up to hold good lines and stuff. And from the Airbus, my next airplane would have been a 57 or a 67, but I stayed on the Airbus for a long time. And in spite of what I say about side sticks and the design and stuff like this, you may be surprised, but I actually did enjoy flying the Airbus and thought it was a fun airplane, good airplane to fly. But I stayed on it, got senior, and then I was looking at, well, it was time to upgrade. Well, I could upgrade to the 777 just as easy and actually have a good seniority position. I'd be very senior on the 57, 67 because we flew them together. I could upgrade to the 777 and have fine seniority. So I thought, well, heck, I'm going to do that. So here's me sitting in the seat. Okay, I'm getting ready to go to Frankfurt. We had two sections of this checkout. One was international and one was just domestic. You had to get your landings and stuff, and you don't get that many internationally. So I'm getting ready to go to Frankfurt, and I had been warned about my check airman. A lot of people really didn't like it. In fact, I had a number of people suggested I should refuse to fly with the guy and get somebody else. Well, it was this guy's last flight as a check airman, and I think it was his last flight also. So I didn't want to kind of hurt his feelings, and I figured, well, at this time I'd have been a captain 12 years, and I didn't care what he kind of said. He wasn't really going to hurt my feelings. So we're getting ready to go push back, and he says, I like to taxi single engine. That's one of the things I'd heard about him. And, we're pretty heavy going. We're going out of Dulles to Frankfurt, and we're pretty heavy. And he says, yeah, you like to taxi single engine. And I said, I don't think that's a really good idea at all. And frankly, I am never going to do that. So now coming in from a trip, usually international, lightweight, I would taxi in on single engine at times. I'd shut it down as we were approaching the gate, and I didn't have to make any turns into the good engine. So yeah, I'd shut one down. It wasn't a big deal. Well, of course, that was my last airplane. I stayed on it for 13 years, became a line check airman, and this is my flight, my second to my last flight. I'm going out to Maui. This is Chicago, and I'm flying from Chicago to Maui. And I had a very good last flight, and I'm going to talk about that in another presentation about how you can have a very good last flight or you can have a very bad last flight. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. That's my little tale of upgrading through various aircraft. And I became a captain on the 777 in September 3rd of 2003. And of course retired in August of 2015. Thanks for watching.